Hello and welcome to Can UPSC Ask This, where we turn today's biggest current affairs into tomorrow's UPSC and OPSC questions. Every episode has three important news stories. I'll explain the topic, but I won't reveal today's answers. Those will be discussed at the beginning of our next episode. So don't just guess, think like an examiner and tell me your answers in the comments. Let's begin with the first question. News number one. With reference to the removal of judges in India, consider the following statements. Parliament can freely discuss the conduct of a Supreme Court or High Court judge at any time. A judge of the Supreme Court or High Court can be removed only on the grounds of proved misbehavior or incapacity. The procedure relating to the investigation of allegations against judges is governed by the Judges Enquiry Act 1968. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? Take a moment, don't rush to answer. We'll come back to this question after understanding today's news. So, why is this in the news? Recently, there has been a debate surrounding Justice Yashwant Verma after he resigned before Parliament could take up the report of the inquiry committee investigating allegations against him. This raises an interesting constitutional question. Now, can Parliament continue impeachment proceedings against a judge who has already resigned? At first glance, this may sound like a political issue. But for UPSC, this is actually a question about the Constitution. Let's understand why. The Constitution protects the independence of the judiciary. That means judges should not be subjected to unnecessary political pressure from either the executive or the legislature. Now, one important safeguard is Article 121. Article 121 says the Parliament cannot discuss the conduct of a judge during the discharge of his duty except when a motion for his removal is under consideration. Got it? Now, this prevents routine political attacks on judges and preserves the judicial independence. Now, let's move to the removal process. Under Article 124(4), a Supreme Court judge can be removed only on two grounds. First is proved misbehavior, and another is incapacity. Okay, this same principle applies to the High Court judges through Article 217. Okay, remember this. But removal isn't simple. It requires an investigation. Okay, a motion in the Parliament, a special majority, in both houses. Okay, and finally an order by the president. The investigation itself is conducted under the Judges Enquiry Act. Judges Enquiry Act 1968. Now here's where today's news become interesting. If a judge resigns before Parliament completes the removal process, what happens? Historically, Parliament has treated resignation as bringing impeachment proceedings to an end because the objective of impeachment is removal from office. Now, if the person has already left office, the removal process loses its purpose. However, and this is the important one, the resignation does not automatically mean or automatically wipe out the criminal liability. Understood? If any offense has been committed. Now, those proceedings can still continue under ordinary law. So today's news is not really about one individual, it's about understanding the constitutional balance between accountability and judicial independence. And that's exactly the kind of concept UPSC loves. Now, I would like to give you an examiner's hint. Whenever judges are in news, don't just read the news article. Revise the appointment, the removal, judicial independence, articles 121, 124, and 217. UPSC often asks the concept, not the controversy. Now, revisit the question. Okay, now go back and read the question once again. Has your answer changed? Don't Google it. Comment your answer below in this format. Write question number 1, your option, and more importantly, tell me why you chose that option. We'll discuss the answer in the next episode. Now, let's move on to our next story. News number 2. Here's the question. With reference to NITI Aayog, consider the following statements. It is a constitutional body established through a constitutional amendment. It serves as the Government of India's premier public policy think tank. One of its objectives is to promote cooperative federalism by involving states in the policy making process. Don't answer immediately. Most UPSC questions aren't difficult because of the facts, they are difficult because of the assumption we make. Let's first understand today's news. Here's the explanation. So, why NITI Aayog is in news today? Recently, NITI Aayog released the Investment Friendliness Index 2026, where states like Gujarat, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Odisha, and Goa emerged as some top performers. Now, before you start memorizing the rankings, let me stop you right there. UPSC is far less interested in who topped the index than in who prepared it, why it was created, and what it measures. Let's understand that. Investment is one of the biggest drivers of economic growth. Whenever a company decides where to set up a factory, a logistics hub, or a manufacturing unit, it looks at several factors, not just land availability. It asks the questions like, is the infrastructure good? Are approvals easy to obtain? Is the policy environment stable? Does the state have skilled manpower? Is there reliable electricity and connectivity? And so much more. The Investment Friendliness Index tries to measure exactly these aspects. It is essentially a diagnostic tool. Its purpose is not to declare the winners and losers. Its real objective is to help states identify areas where they need improvement to attract more investments. Understood? Now, interestingly, infrastructure receives the highest weightage because industries cannot function efficiently without roads, ports, power supply, and digital connectivity. Now, this brings us to an institution that every UPSC aspirant must know well, that is the NITI Aayog. NITI Aayog was established in 2015, as we know, replacing the Planning Commission. Unlike the Planning Commission, which followed a more top down planning approach, NITI Aayog focuses on cooperative and competitive federalism. In simple words, instead of telling states what to do, it works with them. It acts as Government of India's premier public policy think tank. Okay, providing policy advice, encouraging innovation, and promoting the best practices across the states. Now, this is also why you will often see NITI Aayog publishing indices on health, exports, SDGs, innovation, school education, and now investment friendliness. These indices create healthy competition among the states while helping policymakers identify the strengths and the weaknesses. So let's understand the 8 parameters that were included in this index. First, let's go by the highest weightage to the lowest weightage. Okay. First comes the infrastructure, as we read about it. It takes up 25% of the weightage. Then comes business climate. It takes up 15%. Third, resources. Availability of resources, it's 12.5%. Fourth, government policies, it goes up to again 12.5%. Fifth, regulatory ease. Regulatory ease, that is again 12.5%. Sixth, financial health, that becomes 10%. Seventh, institutional environment, that is 7.5%. And last, the eighth parameter is the environmental resilience, that is 5%. So these are the 8 parameters included in this friendliness, investment friendliness index. So today's news is not about memorizing which state ranked first or not. It's about understanding how governance, federalism, and economic development are interconnected. And that's exactly the perspective UPSC expects. Now again, the examiner's hint. Whenever an okay, so examiner's hint. Whenever a new index appears in the news, don't waste time memorizing the entire ranking. Instead, revise these 4 things. Who publishes it? Why was it created? What parameters does it measure? And can UPSC confuse it with another index? Okay, that's where the real questions come from. Now go back to the question once again. After understanding NITI Aayog, has your answer changed? Comment your answer in the format. Question number 2, your option, tell me why, and we will discuss the correct answer and more importantly, the trap hidden in the options in our next episode. Now let's move to today's final and probably the most important story. News number 3. Here's the question. With reference to inflation in India, consider the following statements. A deficient monsoon can contribute to inflation by reducing agricultural output. An increase in international crude oil prices can lead to a higher inflation even if domestic demand remains unchanged. The primary objective of the Monetary Policy Committee is to maintain inflation around the target set by the government. Don't answer yet. At first glance, this looks like a question on inflation, but in reality, it's testing your understanding of agriculture, climate, crude oil, and monetary policy all at once. Let's understand today's news. Here's the explanation. India's retail inflation has increased to 4.38%, crossing RBI's medium-term target of 4% for the first time in several months. Now, many students stop here and simply memorize the number. But that's not what UPSC wants. The real question is why inflation is increasing. Let's break it down. The first reason is monsoon. This year, India has experienced a rainfall deficit. Whenever rainfall is below normal, farmers cultivate fewer crops. Okay, especially during the Kharif season. Lower agricultural production means a lower supply of food grains, vegetables, and pulses. When supply falls, demand remains almost the same. Then the prices rise. Understood? This is one of the reasons food inflation increases, but that's only the half the story. The second reason is El Nino. El Nino is a climatic phenomenon characterized by warming of eastern and central Pacific. For India, it is important because it is often associated with weaker monsoon rainfalls. Okay. A weak monsoon can reduce agricultural output, creating pressure on food prices. Now let's move beyond agriculture. Another major factor is crude oil. India imports nearly 85% of crude oil requirement. So whenever international crude oil price increase, Transporting good becomes more expensive. Manufacturing cost rise. Eventually, businesses pass on these higher costs to the customers. This is what economists call cost pull inflation. Notice something interesting here. Even if people are not buying more goods, prices can still increase because the cost of the production itself has gone up. And that's exactly what UPSC likes to test. Now comes the most important institution in this story, the Monetary Policy Committee, or the MPC. MPC is a 6 member committee headed by the RBI governor. Okay, now its primary responsibility is to maintain the price stability while supporting the economic growth. Whenever inflation rises significantly above the target, the MPC may decide to increase the policy rates, okay, such as the repo rates, to reduce inflationary pressures. But here's the dilemma: if the interest rates are increased too much, borrowing becomes expensive. Okay, now if borrowing becomes expensive, businesses invest less, economic growth slows down. If rates are kept low despite rising inflation, prices may continue to increase. Finding the right balance is the biggest challenge before the RBI. That's why today's news is much bigger than a simple inflation figure. It connects climate, agriculture, energy, global events, and monetary policy into one single topic, and that's precisely why it deserves your attention. Now, examiner's hint. Whenever inflation appears in the news, revise these 6 topics together. First is CPI versus WPI, headline versus core inflation, demand pull versus cost pull inflation, monetary policy committee, repo rate, and reverse repo rate, and how monsoon affects the inflation. Now, UPSC rarely asks inflation in isolation. It usually links it with agriculture, fiscal policy, or the RBI. Now, read the question once again. Don't just think about today's news, think about the concepts we discussed. Comment your answer in this format, like question number 3, option, and if possible, tell me why you rejected the other options. We'll analyze every statement in the next episode. That brings us to the end of today's episode of Can UPSC Ask This? Today we covered 3 important topics: judicial independence and the removal of judges, NITI Aayog and investment friendliness index, and finally inflation and the RBI policy dilemma. Remember, don't look up the answers. Think like an examiner and post your responses in the comments. Question number 1, question number 2, and question number 3. In the next episode, we'll discuss the correct answers, explain why the wrong options were designed to mislead you, and then move on to 3 more important current affairs. If you found this format useful, do subscribe to Vidyarthee Education. Every Wednesday and Saturday, we'll simplify the most important current affairs from UPSC and OPSC. Not by reading the news, but by understanding the concepts behind it. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and remember, UPSC does not test what you read, it tests what you understand. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next episode. Till then, keep learning and stay curious.